In the dusty corridors of military history, some encounters change everything. When Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun walked past what he thought was just another training station, he had no idea he was about to meet the woman who would redefine his understanding of precision, dedication, and the true meaning of strength. Her 3,200-meter badge wasn't just a piece of metal. It was proof of a skill so rare that only 12 people in the entire world possessed it. What happened when he stopped to look closer would challenge everything he thought he knew about limits, both on the battlefield and in the human heart. This is the story of two soldiers whose paths crossed at exactly the right moment, when one glance at a small metal badge would spark a connection that would test the boundaries of military protocol, personal sacrifice, and the power of finding someone who truly understands the weight of the trigger finger. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Fort Bragg training facility as Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun made his routine walk through the advanced marksmanship section. After 8 years in the Army, these corridors had become as familiar to him as his own reflection. The smell of gun oil and cleaning solvent hung in the air, mixed with the distant sound of rifle reports echoing from the outdoor ranges. Marcus had always found comfort in these sounds and smells. They represented order, precision, and the kind of discipline that had shaped his entire adult life. As a newly appointed liaison between the Special Forces Training Division and the Army's elite sniper program, Marcus thought he had seen everything the military had to offer in terms of marksmanship excellence. He had worked alongside some of the finest shooters in the world, men whose names were whispered with reverence in military circles. His own credentials were nothing to dismiss either: expert marksman badges, multiple combat deployments, and a reputation for being able to coordinate complex training operations with mathematical precision. But that Tuesday morning in September was different from all the others, though Marcus wouldn't realize it until much later. He was carrying a clipboard thick with training schedules and requisition forms, his mind focused on the logistical puzzle of coordinating 17 different sniper teams for an upcoming joint exercise. The paperwork was particularly complex this time because they were expecting international observers from allied nations, and every detail had to be perfect. As he walked past the individual training stations, Marcus barely glanced at the shooters lying prone at their rifles. Most were working with standard military-issue weapons at typical training distances: 300 meters, 500 meters, maybe 800 for the more advanced students. These were the bread and butter distances that every military sniper needed to master, the ranges where most combat engagements actually took place. He had almost passed the last station when something made him pause. It wasn't a sound or movement that caught his attention, but rather the absence of sound. While every other position echoed with the sharp crack of rifle fire, this particular station was silent. The shooter lay motionless behind a rifle that looked different from the others. Longer, heavier, with modifications that spoke of serious customization. Marcus found himself slowing, then stopping altogether. Professional curiosity had always been one of his defining traits, and something about the setup at this station triggered every instinct he had developed over years of military service. The rifle was clearly a custom build, probably chambered for something much larger than the standard 7.62 rounds most snipers used. The scope mounted on top was massive, the kind of optics that cost more than most people's cars. But it was the figure behind the rifle that truly captured his attention. The shooter was smaller than he expected, dressed in standard military fatigues that somehow looked both perfectly regulation and distinctly different. The positioning was textbook perfect. Every line of the body spoke of countless hours of training, the kind of muscle memory that only came from absolute dedication to the craft. Marcus checked his watch. It was 0847 hours, and according to his clipboard, this particular station wasn't scheduled to be in use until after 1000. Someone was either seriously early or seriously behind schedule, and as the facility liaison, it was his job to know which. He approached quietly, not wanting to disturb what was obviously a delicate process. As he got closer, he could see that the shooter was wearing hearing protection and seemed completely absorbed in whatever calculation was happening in their head. The rifle remained perfectly still, aimed downrange toward targets that Marcus couldn't even see with his naked eye. That's when he noticed the badges. Military personnel wore their achievements on their uniforms like a roadmap of their careers, and Marcus had learned to read these stories at a glance. But the small collection of pins and patches on the shooter's sleeve made him stop breathing for just a moment. There, nestled among the expected marksmanship qualifications and unit insignias, was a badge he had only heard about in whispered conversations among the most elite circles of military snipers. The 3,200-meter badge. Marcus had been around military shooters long enough to know that most sniper engagements happened at much shorter distances. A 600-meter shot was considered excellent. An 800-meter shot was exceptional. Anything beyond 1,000 meters entered the realm of the truly elite. But 3,200 meters, that was something else entirely. That was nearly 2 miles of distance, a shot that had to account for wind drift, bullet drop, atmospheric pressure, temperature variations, and the rotation of the Earth itself. He knew the stories, of course. Every sniper did. There were legends about shots made at extreme distances in Afghanistan and Iraq, carefully documented engagements where American snipers had pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible. But those stories always seemed to involve the same handful of names, the same elite units, the same almost mythical figures who operated in the shadows of special operations. Standing here in a training facility in North Carolina, looking at that small metal badge, Marcus realized he was looking at something extremely rare. According to the rumor mill that circulated through military sniper communities, fewer than 20 people in the entire world had ever achieved a confirmed kill at 3,200 meters or greater. The physical and mental requirements were so extreme that most shooters never even attempted such distances. The shooter stirred slightly, adjusting position with movements so subtle they were almost imperceptible. Marcus found himself holding his breath, suddenly aware that he was witnessing something special. The concentration radiating from the figure behind the rifle was almost tangible, the kind of focus that shut out everything else in the world except the target and the calculations needed to reach it. Without thinking, Marcus took a step closer, trying to get a better view of the target area. The movement was silent, but somehow the shooter sensed his presence. A hand came up in a subtle gesture that clearly meant stop without breaking the shooting position or turning around. Marcus froze. In 8 years of military service, he had developed a healthy respect for people who could command attention without saying a word, and something about this particular gesture carried an authority that went beyond rank or position. This was someone who was used to being in control of their environment, used to making decisions where the margin for error was measured in fractions of inches at distances most people couldn't even imagine. The silence stretched on for what felt like minutes, but was probably only 30 seconds. Marcus found himself studying every detail he could observe without moving from his position. The rifle was definitely custom, built around what looked like a .338 Lapua Magnum action, probably pushing bullets that weighed twice what most snipers were used to handling. The stock was adjustable in multiple dimensions, fitted specifically to the shooter's physical measurements. Even the bipod was specialized, designed to provide rock-solid stability on any terrain. But it was the badges that kept drawing his attention. Beyond the 3,200-meter qualification, he could see evidence of multiple combat deployments, advanced training certifications, and unit patches from some of the most elite organizations in the military. This wasn't just someone who was good at shooting targets on a range. This was a combat veteran whose skills had been tested in the most demanding conditions possible. A soft breeze moved across the range, and Marcus watched as the shooter made a minute adjustment to the rifle's position. The movement was so small he almost missed it, but it spoke to an awareness of environmental conditions that went far beyond what most people could perceive. This was someone who could feel changes in wind speed and direction that wouldn't register on most measuring instruments. Finally, the shooter took the shot. The sound was different from the rifles Marcus was used to hearing. Where most military rifles produced a sharp crack, this one created a deep, rolling boom that seemed to shake the air itself. The recoil was substantial enough that Marcus could see the entire shooting position shift slightly, but the recovery was immediate and controlled. For a moment, nothing happened. At the distances this rifle was designed for, there was a significant delay between the shot and any visible impact. Marcus found himself counting seconds, trying to calculate how long it would take a bullet to travel whatever distance was being attempted. Then, the shooter's radio crackled to life. A voice from the target area, distorted by distance and static, confirmed what Marcus was beginning to suspect. Hit. Dead center. Range 3,150 meters. The shooter finally moved, rolling slightly to one side and pulling off the hearing protection. That's when Marcus got his first clear look at her face and realized that everything he thought he knew about military snipers was about to be challenged in ways he had never imagined. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez looked up at him with eyes that seemed to hold depths Marcus couldn't immediately understand. Her face was lean and angular, marked by the kind of focus that came from years of training that pushed human capabilities to their absolute limits. But there was something else there too, a weariness that spoke of experiences most people would never have to face. "You're the new liaison," she said, her voice carrying just a hint of an accent that Marcus couldn't immediately place. "Marcus Chun, right? I've heard about you." Marcus realized he was still staring at her badge and forced himself to meet her eyes. "I've heard about you too, though apparently not enough." "Staff Sergeant Vasquez, isn't it?" She nodded, already beginning the process of securing her rifle. Every movement was economical and precise, the result of countless repetitions that had made complex procedures into automatic habits. "Most people just call me Elena when we're not in formal settings. And yes, before you ask, the badge is real." There was something in her tone that suggested she had been through this conversation before, probably many times. Marcus got the impression that she was used to people questioning her credentials, her presence, her right to wear the insignia that marked her as one of the most elite shooters in the world. "I wasn't questioning it," Marcus said, though he realized that wasn't entirely true. "I was just surprised. I thought all the extreme distance shooters were in special operations units." Elena's smile was small, but genuine. "Most of them are. I'm what you might call an exception to several rules." As she continued packing her equipment, Marcus found himself studying her more carefully. She was probably in her late 20s, with the kind of build that spoke of serious physical conditioning without being bulky. Her movements had an efficiency that reminded him of the best soldiers he had worked with, people who had learned to waste no energy on unnecessary actions. "That was 3,150 meters, he said, still trying to process what he had witnessed. "In training conditions, but still counts," Elena finished for him. "Though I've done better in less controlled situations." The casual way she said it made Marcus pause. There was no boasting in her voice, no attempt to impress him with the magnitude of what she had just accomplished. She spoke about extreme distance shooting the way most people talked about their morning commute, as a routine part of her professional life. "How long have you been training here?" Marcus asked, realizing that he should probably know this information already, but somehow hadn't encountered her file in his briefings. 3 weeks, Elena said, shouldering the rifle case with an ease that belied its obvious weight. "I'm between deployments, and they wanted me to work on some technical aspects of the long-range program. Apparently, there are some new computational methods for ballistic calculation that might be useful." Marcus made a mental note to review the current roster more carefully. Somehow, one of the most elite snipers in the military had been training at his facility for 3 weeks without him being aware of it. That suggested either a significant oversight in his briefing process or a level of operational security that went well beyond normal procedures. "What unit are you with?" he asked, then immediately wondered if that was information he was clear to know. Elena's pause was almost imperceptible, but Marcus caught it. "That gets complicated," she said finally. "I'm technically attached to several different organizations, depending on the mission requirements. My permanent assignment is with a special projects unit that most people haven't heard of." The vague answer told Marcus everything he needed to know about Elena's actual role in the military. People who gave those kinds of responses usually worked in areas where operational security was more important than normal military courtesy. He had met enough special operations personnel to recognize the careful way they discussed their work, even in friendly conversations. Well, Marcus said, I should probably introduce myself properly. I'm the new liaison between SF training and the sniper program. If you need anything for your training here, I'm supposed to be the guy who can make it happen. Elena studied him for a moment, and Marcus had the unsettling feeling that she was evaluating him in ways that went beyond simple professional courtesy. Her gaze was direct and measuring, the kind of look he associated with people who had learned to make quick, accurate assessments of everyone they encountered. Actually, she said, there might be something you can help with. I'm working on a training proposal that could use some administrative support. It's a bit unconventional, but it might be exactly the kind of thing your office could facilitate. Marcus found himself nodding before he had even heard the details. There was something about Elena that commanded attention and respect, a presence that went beyond her obvious skills with a rifle. He sensed that whatever she was proposing would be worth listening to, even if it challenged normal procedures. What kind of proposal, he asked. Elena glanced around the range, checking to make sure they weren't being overheard. The gesture was subtle, but professional, the kind of precaution that had become second nature to someone who dealt with sensitive information regularly. I think, she said, that might be better discussed somewhere more private. Are you free for coffee later today? There's a place off base that has better security for conversations like this. Marcus checked his watch and mentally reviewed his schedule. He had meetings planned for most of the afternoon, but something told him that this conversation was going to be more important than routine administrative work. I can make time, he said. When and where? Elena pulled a pen from her pocket and wrote an address on the margin of one of his papers. Her handwriting was precise and economical like everything else about her. 1,800 hours. It's a small place, but the owner understands that some conversations need privacy. As she walked away, Marcus found himself watching her movement with professional interest. Even carrying heavy equipment and walking across uneven terrain, Elena moved with the kind of balance and spatial awareness that marked someone who had undergone extensive tactical training. She was clearly much more than just an exceptional marksman. Standing alone on the range, Marcus looked down at the address in his hand and realized that his routine morning had just become significantly more complicated. He had started the day thinking he understood his role and responsibilities at Fort Bragg. Now he was scheduled to have a clandestine conversation with one of the most elite soldiers he had ever encountered about a training proposal that was apparently too sensitive to discuss on a military installation. For the first time in months, Marcus felt the familiar thrill of being involved in something that mattered beyond routine bureaucracy. Whatever Elena had in mind, it was clearly going to challenge normal procedures and push boundaries that most people took for granted. As he walked back toward the administrative buildings, Marcus found himself thinking about that 3,200-meter badge and what it represented. He had spent years around military excellence, but witnessing Elena's shooting had reminded him that there were still levels of skill and dedication that could surprise him. The casual precision of her shot, the understated way she discussed her capabilities, and the mysterious nature of her actual military role all pointed to someone operating at the very edge of human capability. By the time he reached his office, Marcus had already begun rearranging his afternoon schedule. Whatever Elena wanted to discuss, he was going to make sure he was prepared for it. Something told him that this conversation was going to change his understanding of what was possible in military training and possibly his understanding of himself as well. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of routine meetings and administrative tasks, but Marcus found his thoughts constantly returning to that moment on the range. The image of Elena behind her rifle, the sound of that massive cartridge launching a bullet nearly 2 miles downrange, and the quiet confidence in her voice when she confirmed the hit, all of it had lodged in his mind with unusual persistence. He realized he was looking forward to 1,800 hours with an anticipation that went beyond simple professional curiosity. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was about to encounter something that would genuinely challenge his assumptions about what was possible in his chosen field. As he prepared for what promised to be an unusual conversation, Marcus had no idea that this chance encounter with Elena and her 3,200-meter badge was about to set in motion a series of events that would test everything he thought he knew about military excellence, personal dedication, and the sometimes blurry line between professional admiration and something much more complicated. The address Elena had written led Marcus to a small coffee shop 15 minutes off base, tucked between a used bookstore and a military surplus outlet. The brass shell, according to the weathered sign hanging over the entrance, looked like the kind of place that had been serving coffee to service members for decades without bothering to update its decor or menu. Marcus arrived 10 minutes early, a habit that had been drilled into him during his first week of basic training and had never left him. The interior was exactly what he expected from the exterior: worn wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and the kind of authentic atmosphere that came from years of genuine use rather than calculated design. Several patrons looked like they were either active military or veterans, identifiable by their posture, haircuts, and the way they positioned themselves with clear views of the entrances. He chose a table in the back corner, facing the door, and ordered coffee that turned out to be significantly better than anything available in the base dining facilities. The owner, a man who looked to be in his 60s with the bearing of a former senior NCO, brought the cup personally and made brief but knowing eye contact that suggested he understood the nature of conversations that happen at corner tables. Elena arrived exactly on time, moving through the space with the same controlled awareness Marcus had noticed on the range. She had changed out of her military uniform into civilian clothes, but somehow still managed to look distinctly military. Her jeans and sweater were neat and practical, chosen for function rather than fashion, and she moved with the same economical precision he had observed that morning. "This place has interesting acoustics," she said as she sat down, speaking quietly but clearly. "Conversations at this table are effectively private, even when the place is crowded." The owner is a former intelligence specialist who understands operational security better than most people realize. Marcus glanced around with new appreciation for the coffee shop's layout. What he had taken for random arrangement was actually carefully designed to provide privacy for sensitive conversations while maintaining natural sight lines and multiple exit routes. The background music and ambient noise were positioned to create effective audio barriers between tables. "How did you find this place?" he asked. Elena accepted a cup of coffee from the owner, who approached and retreated without interrupting their conversation. "I make it a point to identify secure meeting locations wherever I'm stationed. It's a professional habit that has proven useful over the years." The casual way she mentioned operational security habits reminded Marcus that he was dealing with someone whose training went well beyond standard military instruction. Everything about Elena suggested exposure to levels of tactical and intelligence education that most soldiers never encountered. "So," Marcus said, "tell me about this training proposal." Elena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, studying Marcus for a moment before beginning. "What do you know about current long-range shooting records and the evolution of extreme distance marksmanship?" It was an unexpected starting point, but Marcus had learned to recognize when someone was building toward a larger point. "I know the basics. Confirmed combat kills at extreme distances have been increasing over the past decade, mostly due to improvements in equipment and computational methods. Canadian snipers hold most of the official records, with a few Americans and British shooters close behind." Elena nodded approvingly. "Good foundation. Now, what do you know about the difference between training for record attempts and training for combat effectiveness at extreme ranges?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I assume there's a significant difference in environmental conditions, target selection, and time pressure. Range shooting is controlled conditions. Combat shooting is anything but controlled." "Exactly," Elena said, leaning forward slightly. "Most extreme distance training focuses on achieving maximum accuracy under ideal conditions. that's useful for setting records and demonstrating technical capability, but it doesn't necessarily prepare shooters for the reality of using those skills in combat situations. She paused to sip her coffee, and Marcus got the impression that she was organizing thoughts she had been developing for some time. My proposal, Elena continued, is to develop a training program that bridges that gap. Instead of focusing purely on maximum distance or ideal accuracy, we would train shooters to be effective at extreme ranges under adverse conditions that more closely simulate combat reality. Marcus was beginning to understand why Elena had wanted to discuss this away from the base. Training programs that deviated from established military doctrine required careful handling, especially when they were being proposed by someone whose actual military role was deliberately vague. "What kind of adverse conditions?" he asked. Elena's eyes took on an intensity that reminded Marcus of the focus he had observed on the range. Time pressure, moving targets, environmental extremes, equipment failures, physical stress, psychological pressure. Most current training assumes the shooter has unlimited time to calculate and adjust for perfect conditions. Combat doesn't provide those luxuries. As she spoke, Marcus found himself creating mental images of the scenario she was describing. Traditional sniper training was indeed focused on precision under control conditions, with careful attention to ideal positioning and unlimited time for calculation. What Elena was suggesting would push shooters in a territory that most training programs avoided because of the complexity and risk involved. "Have you tested any of these concepts?" Marcus asked. Elena's smile was small, but significant. "That's the interesting part. I've been developing some of these methods through personal experience over multiple deployments. The techniques work, but they require training approaches that don't currently exist in any formal military program." She pulled a tablet from her bag and showed Marcus what appeared to be a carefully detailed training outline. The document was clearly the result of extensive planning and refinement, with modules covering everything from rapid environmental assessment to stress-induced shooting protocols. The computational aspects alone would require software development that goes beyond current ballistic calculation programs, Elena explained, scrolling through technical specifications that made Marcus realize she was operating at a level of expertise he hadn't fully appreciated. Most existing programs assume static conditions and unlimited calculation time. We would need real-time adaptive algorithms that could adjust for changing conditions while under combat stress. Marcus studied the outline, recognizing that Elena was proposing something significantly more ambitious than a simple training modification. She was essentially suggesting the development of an entirely new approach to extreme distance marksmanship that would require resources, expertise, and institutional support at levels that went well beyond what most training programs could access. "This would require approval from people way above my pay grade," Marcus said carefully. "The software development alone would need funding and security clearances that take months to arrange." Elena nodded, clearly having anticipated this response. "That's where your role as liaison becomes important. I don't need you to approve anything or make commitments beyond your authority. I need you to help me present this proposal to people who do have that level of authority." Marcus was beginning to understand the complexity of Elena's situation. She had developed expertise and methods that could significantly advance military capability, but her operational role made it difficult for her to navigate normal institutional channels. She needed someone with established administrative credibility to help her access decision-makers who could evaluate and potentially implement her innovations. "Who would we be approaching?" Marcus asked. Elena consulted her tablet again, pulling up what appeared to be an organizational chart with names and contact information. "I've identified key personnel in Special Operations Command, the Army Research Laboratory, and the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, who would have both the authority and the technical background to evaluate this proposal properly." The names on Elena's list impressed Marcus with their level of seniority and specialization. These were people who worked on the cutting edge of military technology and training development, the kind of officials who typically only dealt with proposals that had been thoroughly vetted through multiple levels of command. How do you know these people would be interested? Marcus asked. Elena's expression became more serious, and Marcus sensed that she was about to share information that went beyond what she had initially planned to reveal. I've had informal conversations with some of them during previous assignments, she said carefully. There's significant interest in advancing extreme distance capabilities, but no one has had the combination of combat experience and technical expertise necessary to develop practical training methods. My unique position gives me access to both operational requirements and theoretical possibilities that most people don't have. Marcus was beginning to piece together a picture of Elena's actual role in the military that was much more complex than he had initially assumed. She wasn't just an elite sniper who happened to be good with technology. She was someone who had been specifically positioned to bridge the gap between operational requirements and technical development. What kind of timeline are you thinking about? Marcus asked. Elena pulled up another document that showed a detailed project schedule extending over 18 months. Phase 1 would be proposal development and initial approval, which should take about 3 months if we can get meetings with the right people. Phase 2 would be software development and initial testing protocols, probably 6 months. Phase 3 would be full program implementation and initial training groups, another 9 months. The level of detail in Elena's planning impressed Marcus almost as much as her shooting skills had that morning. She had clearly thought through every aspect of this proposal with the same precision she applied to long-range calculations. What would you need from me specifically? Marcus asked. Elena leaned back in her chair, studying Marcus with the same measuring gaze he had noticed on the range. I need someone who understands military administrative processes and can help me navigate the bureaucracy without getting tangled up in security clearance complications. Your role as liaison gives you legitimate reasons to be involved in advanced training discussions, and your records suggest you're good at making complex coordination happen smoothly. Marcus realized that Elena had researched his background much more thoroughly than he had researched hers. The comment about his coordination record was accurate, but specific enough to suggest she had access to detailed personnel files. You've done your homework on me, he said. Elena's smile was genuine and slightly apologetic. Professional habit. I make it a point to know who I'm working with before I propose anything that could affect both our careers. The acknowledgement that this proposal could affect their careers brought home the seriousness of what Elena was suggesting. Success could advance both their positions significantly, but failure or mishandling could have negative consequences that would follow them for years. What's the biggest risk? Marcus asked. Elena considered the question for several moments before answering. The biggest operational risk is that we propose something too advanced for current institutional capabilities, and it gets shelved indefinitely. The biggest personal risk is that we get identified as people who go around normal channels, which can make future career advancement more difficult. Her honest assessment of the potential negative consequences increased Marcus's respect for her planning and judgment. She wasn't approaching this proposal with naive optimism, but with a clear understanding of both the opportunities and the dangers involved. On the other hand, Elena continued, the potential benefits go well beyond personal career advancement. If this program works, it could significantly improve the effectiveness of military snipers in combat situations that are becoming more common as engagement distances continue to increase. Marcus found himself thinking about the strategic implications of what Elena was proposing. Modern combat was indeed pushing engagement ranges to greater distances, and the current training programs have been developed for conflicts where most engagements happened at much shorter ranges. Have you seen situations in deployment where current training was inadequate? He asked. Elena's expression became more serious, and Marcus sensed that she was drawing on experiences that had shaped her understanding of operational requirements. Multiple situations, she said quietly. Targets that needed to be engaged at extreme distances under time pressure, environmental conditions that made traditional calculation methods useless, equipment that failed in ways that current training doesn't prepare you for. I've seen shooters miss critical opportunities because they were trained for ideal conditions that don't exist in combat. The intensity in Elena's voice told Marcus that these weren't theoretical scenarios she was describing, but actual combat experiences where inadequate training had real consequences. Her proposal was coming from someone who had personally identified gaps between training and operational reality. How many people do you think could benefit from this kind of training? Marcus asked. Elena consulted her tablet again, pulling up statistical analyses that showed she had researched this question thoroughly. Current extreme distance qualified snipers number approximately 200 across all military branches. But the number who could potentially qualify for this level of training is probably closer to 500, and the number who could benefit from some aspects of the training is much larger. The scope of potential impact was impressive, but it also suggested that Elena was proposing something that would require significant institutional commitment to implement properly. This isn't a small pilot program, Marcus observed. No, Elena agreed. But small pilot programs tend to get lost in bureaucratic shuffle and never achieve the scale necessary to create real change. This proposal is designed to be significant enough to attract serious attention and funding from the beginning. Marcus was beginning to appreciate the strategic thinking that had gone into Elena's proposal. She wasn't just suggesting tactical improvements, but institutional changes that could affect military training for years to come. What happens if we can't get the meetings you want? Marcus asked. Elena's response was immediate and confident. Then we develop fallback positions and alternative approaches until we find decision-makers who can recognize the value of what we're proposing. This isn't the kind of idea that works once and then disappears. The operational requirements are real and growing, so eventually someone with authority will understand the need. Her confidence was impressive, but Marcus sensed that it was based on more than just optimism. Elena spoke like someone who had successfully navigated institutional challenges before and understood how to persist through bureaucratic obstacles. When do you want to start? Marcus asked. Elena checked her watch, a gesture that reminded Marcus of her precise awareness of time and scheduling. I was hoping we could begin identifying initial contacts within the next week. I have a window between current assignment responsibilities when I can focus on proposal development, but it won't last indefinitely. The timeline was ambitious, but not impossible, assuming Marcus could rearrange his current responsibilities to accommodate the additional workload. He found himself mentally reviewing his schedule and identifying tasks that could be delegated or postponed. I'll need to restructure some of my current projects, Marcus said, but I think I can make this work. What do you need from me first? Elena's smile was the warmest expression Marcus had seen from her since they had met. Thank you. I think this could be really important, not just for our careers, but for people who need these capabilities in the field. As they spent the next hour going through Elena's detailed proposal, Marcus found himself increasingly impressed by the depth and sophistication of her planning. She had anticipated administrative challenges, identified potential funding sources, and developed implementation strategies that showed a level of institutional understanding that went well beyond what most field operators possessed. But beyond the professional aspects of their conversation, Marcus was also becoming aware of Elena as a person in ways that went beyond her military credentials. Her passion for the project was evident in every detail she explained, and her commitment to improving training for other soldiers spoke to values that aligned closely with his own professional motivations. By the time they finished discussing the initial phases of the proposal, Marcus realized that he was looking forward to working with Elena in ways that surprised him. Her combination of technical expertise, operational experience, and institutional awareness created a professional dynamic unlike anything he had experienced in previous military assignments. I think, Marcus said as they prepared to leave, this is going to be more interesting than my usual liaison responsibilities. Elena's laugh was genuine and infectious. I certainly hope so. Interesting usually means we're pushing boundaries in useful directions. As they walked out of the coffee shop together, Marcus found himself thinking about the balance between professional excellence and personal connection. Elena was clearly someone who operated at the highest levels of military capability, but she was also someone whose company he genuinely enjoyed and whose perspective challenged his own assumptions about what was possible in their shared field. The drive back to base gave Marcus time to process the full implications of what he had just committed to supporting. Elena's proposal was ambitious, potentially career-defining, and unlike anything he had encountered in his previous military experience. But it was also exactly the kind of challenge that made military service meaningful rather than merely routine. As he entered his quarters that evening, Marcus found himself looking forward to the next phase of this unexpected collaboration with an anticipation that went beyond simple professional interest. Elena had introduced him to possibilities he hadn't previously considered, both in terms of military training advancement and in terms of working relationships that could challenge him to grow in ways he hadn't anticipated. The 3,200-meter badge that had first caught his attention that morning had led to a conversation that was already reshaping his understanding of his own role and responsibilities. As Marcus prepared for what promised to be a series of challenging and potentially transformative weeks ahead, he realized that encountering Elena had reminded him why he had chosen military service in the first place. For the opportunity to work with exceptional people on projects that could make a real difference in the lives of others who served. 3 weeks after their meeting at the Brass Shell, Marcus found himself working 18-hour days that blurred the line between professional dedication and personal obsession. Elena's training proposal had evolved from an ambitious concept into a comprehensive program that was capturing attention at levels of military leadership he had never directly accessed before. But somewhere in the maze of meetings, technical specifications, and bureaucratic navigation, Marcus had begun to realize that his investment in the project went beyond professional interest. The realization hit him during a late-night session in Elena's temporary office, a converted storage room in the advanced training facility that she had transformed into a command center for their proposal development. Maps, ballistic charts, and technical diagrams covered every available wall surface, while 2 laptops and a stack of reference manuals occupied the small desk. The space felt more like a research laboratory than a military office, and working there with Elena had become the highlight of Marcus's daily routine. The software integration is going to be more complex than we initially estimated, Elena said, looking up from a screen full of algorithmic code that meant nothing to Marcus but clearly made perfect sense to her. The real-time calculation requirements for moving targets under stress conditions require processing power that goes beyond what most field computers can handle. Marcus nodded from his position at the secondary laptop, where he had been coordinating meetings with Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency representatives who were surprisingly interested in Elena's computational approaches to ballistic calculation. Dr. Richardson from DARPA thinks the processing challenges might actually push some interesting developments in field portable computing. He's talking about adaptive hardware that could have applications beyond sniper training. Elena's excitement was evident in the way she leaned forward, her focus intensifying in a way that Marcus had learned to recognize as the beginning of one of her analytical deep dives that could actually solve multiple problems at once. If we develop computational methods that advance field processing capabilities generally, it becomes much easier to justify the research investment. Working closely with Elena over the past 3 weeks had given Marcus insights into her thinking processes that went well beyond their initial professional interaction. She approached problems with a combination of intuitive understanding and methodical analysis that consistently produced solutions other people missed. Her ability to see connections between seemingly unrelated aspects of complex challenges was unlike anything Marcus had encountered in his military experience. But it was the moments between the analytical discussions that had begun to create complications Marcus hadn't anticipated. Elena had a way of becoming completely absorbed in her work that was both impressive and oddly attractive. When she was focused on a particularly challenging problem, everything else seemed to disappear from her awareness, creating an intensity of concentration that reminded Marcus why he had been drawn to military service in the first place. "We should probably call it a night," Marcus said, checking his watch and realizing it was nearly midnight. We've got the presentation to Colonel Morrison first thing tomorrow morning, and we need to be sharp for that conversation. Elena looked up from her screen with the slightly disoriented expression she got when transitioning from deep focus to normal awareness. Right. Morrison. He's the one with the special operations background and the advanced degree in systems engineering. That's him, Marcus confirmed. And according to my research, he's also someone who doesn't waste time on proposals that aren't ready for serious consideration. As Elena began shutting down her laptops and organizing the materials they would need for the presentation, Marcus found himself watching her movements with attention that went beyond professional observation. Her efficiency was graceful in a way that suggested years of training had made complex tasks look effortless. Even mundane activities like filing documents and securing equipment had a precision that spoke to habits developed under conditions where attention to detail could be a matter of life and death. Marcus, Elena said without looking up from her organizational tasks, "Can I ask you something personal?" The question caught him off guard, partly because Elena rarely initiated conversations that went beyond their project work, and partly because her tone suggested she was about to venture into territory they had both been carefully avoiding. "Sure," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. Elena finished securing her materials before turning to face him directly. "Why did you agree to help me with this proposal? I mean the real reason, not the professional justification." Marcus felt a moment of panic as he realized that Elena's question was pointing directly at motivations he had been trying not to examine too closely. The honest answer involved admiration for her skills, fascination with her mind, and increasingly complicated feelings about her as a person that went well beyond what military professionalism should allow. "It's a good proposal," he said, knowing even as he spoke that the answer was inadequate. The kind of project that could make a real difference in military effectiveness. Elena's gaze was steady and measuring, the same look Marcus had learned to associate with her evaluating complex problems. "That's part of it," she said, "but I don't think it's all of it." The directness of her observation reminded Marcus that Elena was someone who had been trained to read people as carefully as she read environmental conditions for extreme distance shots. Attempting to deflect or mislead her was probably pointless. "I suppose," Marcus said carefully, "I found the challenge interesting. And working with someone who operates at your level of expertise has been educational in ways I didn't expect." Elena nodded slowly, as if his answer confirmed something she had been thinking. "I've been wondering about that myself. This collaboration has been different from other professional relationships I've had in the military." The admission hung in the air between them, creating a moment of shared acknowledgement that their working relationship had developed dimensions neither of them had initially planned or expected. "Different how?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Elena moved closer to where Marcus was sitting, close enough that he could see the intensity in her eyes that he had first noticed on the shooting range. More engaging, more personal, more... She paused, clearly searching for the right word. More important than it should be if this was just about the project. Marcus felt his heart rate increase in a way that had nothing to do with professional excitement and everything to do with the realization that Elena was acknowledging feelings he had been trying to manage for weeks. "Elena," he said, "we need to be careful about this. Military regulations about personal relationships are pretty clear, especially between people working on classified projects." Elena's smile was small, but knowing. "I'm aware of the regulations. I'm also aware that we're both adults who are capable of maintaining professional standards while acknowledging that our personal connection has become more complex than either of us initially intended." Her honesty was both reassuring and terrifying. Marcus had spent years in military environments where personal feelings were carefully compartmentalized and professional relationships were maintained through clearly defined boundaries. Elena was suggesting a level of openness about their situation that required trust and maturity he wasn't sure he possessed. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. Elena sat down across from him, maintaining eye contact in a way that reminded Marcus of the focus she brought to everything she considered important. "I'm suggesting we acknowledge what's happening between us and figure out how to handle it responsibly. Pretending these feelings don't exist isn't going to make them go away, and it might actually make it harder to maintain the professional standards we both need to uphold. The logic of her approach was characteristically Elena, direct, practical, and focused on finding solutions rather than avoiding problems. But the emotional implications of what she was proposing felt much more complicated than Marcus was prepared to handle. The project has to come first, Marcus said. If our personal situation compromises our ability to get this training program implemented, we're not just failing ourselves, we're failing the people who could benefit from these methods. Elena's nod was immediate and emphatic. Absolutely. The project is too important to risk over personal complications. But I think we're both professional enough to maintain appropriate boundaries while acknowledging that our connection goes beyond just work. As they talked through the complexities of their situation, Marcus found himself impressed once again by Elena's ability to think through challenging problems with clarity and precision. She approached their personal dynamic with the same analytical rigor she brought to ballistic calculations, identifying potential problems and developing strategies to minimize risks while maximizing positive outcomes. So what do we do practically? Marcus asked. Elena pulled out a notepad and began writing, approaching their relationship management with the same systematic organization she applied to project planning. First, we maintain complete professionalism in all work-related interactions. No personal discussions during meetings, no inappropriate contact, no behavior that could be misinterpreted by colleagues or supervisors. Marcus watched her create what was essentially a protocol for managing their personal connection while protecting their professional responsibilities. The methodical approach was very Elena, but it also provided a framework that made their situation feel more manageable. Second, Elena continued, we establish clear boundaries around our personal interactions. Off-duty conversations are acceptable, but only in appropriate settings and only when they won't interfere with our work responsibilities. The structure Elena was creating felt both restrictive and liberating. By clearly defining what was and wasn't acceptable, she was providing a way for them to acknowledge their feelings without compromising their professional obligations. Third, Elena said, looking up from her notes, we agree that if our personal situation becomes a distraction from the project, we address it immediately and directly. No, letting things develop to the point where they interfere with our work. Marcus found himself nodding as Elena outlined her approach. The framework she was proposing required a level of emotional maturity and professional discipline that would be challenging to maintain, but it offered a path forward that didn't require them to ignore their growing connection. And fourth, Elena said, we acknowledge that this situation could evolve in ways we can't predict, and we commit to handling whatever develops with honesty and respect for each other and for our military obligations. The comprehensive nature of Elena's relationship management protocol impressed Marcus almost as much as her technical proposals had. She had identified potential complications and developed strategies for addressing them before they became problems, creating a structure that could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining clear priorities. This is very thorough, Marcus observed. Elena's smile was slightly self-deprecating. I tend to overplan things that matter to me. It's a professional hazard of working in fields where inadequate preparation can have serious consequences. The admission that their relationship mattered to Elena in ways that triggered her most careful planning habits was both flattering and sobering. Marcus realized that she was investing the same level of attention in managing their personal connection that she brought to military operations where lives depended on precise execution. So we try this approach and see how it works, Marcus said. Elena nodded, but her expression became more serious. With one important caveat. If at any point either of us feels like our personal situation is compromising our professional judgment or the success of the project, we have an honest conversation about whether we need to step back from the personal aspects of our relationship. The possibility that their growing connection might ultimately require them to compartmentalize their feelings completely was sobering. But Marcus appreciated Elena's willingness to address even the most difficult potential outcomes. Agreed, Marcus said. The project has to succeed, regardless of what happens between us personally. As they finished their conversation and prepared to leave the office, Marcus found himself both relieved and apprehensive about the framework Elena had proposed. Having clear guidelines for managing their relationship felt much better than trying to navigate undefined emotional territory while working on such an important professional project. But walking across the base toward their respective quarters, Marcus also realized that Elena's systematic approach to their relationship management highlighted just how significant their connection had become. People didn't develop comprehensive protocols for managing feelings that were simple or easily dismissed. One more thing, Elena said as they reached the point where their paths diverged toward different residential areas. Thank you for being honest about this situation. A lot of people would have tried to ignore the complications or handle them less directly. Marcus met her gaze, feeling the same intensity of connection that had been developing over weeks of close collaboration. Thank you for bringing it up. I wasn't sure how to address what was happening between us without risking the project. Elena's smile was warm and genuine. That's exactly why we needed to talk about it. Now, we can focus on tomorrow's presentation without wondering what the other person is thinking about our working relationship. As Marcus walked to his quarters, he found himself thinking about the balance between professional excellence and personal connection that Elena had helped them navigate. Her approach to their relationship had been characteristically thoughtful and practical, but it had also required a level of emotional honesty that challenged him to be more direct about his own feelings than he was typically comfortable with. The next morning's presentation to Colonel Morrison went better than either Marcus or Elena had expected. The colonel's technical background allowed him to appreciate the sophisticated aspects of Elena's proposal, while his operational experience helped him understand the practical applications that could make the training program valuable for active military units. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need to be supporting, Colonel Morrison said after Elena had finished walking him through the computational aspects of real-time ballistic calculation under stress conditions. Have you considered the applications for urban combat scenarios where traditional sniper positioning isn't available? Elena's response demonstrated the depth of her thinking about practical applications. Actually, urban scenarios were one of the primary drivers for developing these methods. Traditional extreme distance training assumes ideal positioning and clear sight lines that rarely exist in urban environments. This program is designed specifically to address those limitations. Marcus watched Elena handle the colonel's questions with the same precision and confidence she brought to everything else, but he was also aware of their personal connection in ways that added a new dimension to his professional admiration. The framework they had established the previous evening seemed to be working. He could focus completely on the substance of their presentation while remaining aware of Elena as someone who mattered to him beyond their professional collaboration. Colonel Morrison's final assessment exceeded their most optimistic expectations. I'm going to recommend this proposal for accelerated review through Special Operations Command. Dr. Rodriguez from the Army Research Laboratory needs to see this computational work, and I think General Patterson would be very interested in the operational applications. As they left the colonel's office, Marcus felt the satisfaction of professional success, combined with pride in Elena's achievement, and gratitude for being part of something that was clearly going to advance military capability in meaningful ways. That went well, Elena said as they walked across the base toward the training facility. Better than well, Marcus replied. Morrison doesn't usually recommend accelerated review for anything unless he's convinced it's genuinely important. Elena's smile was brilliant, and Marcus found himself thinking that her happiness about the project's success was one of the most attractive things he had ever seen. The realization reminded him that their relationship framework would need to accommodate not just the complications of their growing connection, but also the ways that professional success could intensify personal feelings. Over the following days, Marcus discovered that Elena's approach to managing their relationship was both more effective and more challenging than he had anticipated. Having clear boundaries allowed them to work together with focus and efficiency, but acknowledging their personal connection also made him more aware of everything about Elena that drew him to her in the first place. The project continued to gain momentum as more senior officials reviewed Elena's proposal and recognized its potential for advancing military capabilities. Each successful meeting and positive evaluation brought them closer to implementation, but also required more time working closely together under increasingly intense scrutiny from people who could make or break their careers. Marcus began to understand that Elena had been right about the need to address their personal situation directly. Trying to ignore their growing connection while working on such an important project would have been impossible, and the complications would have eventually undermined their professional effectiveness. Her systematic approach had given them tools for managing feelings that could easily have become overwhelming without clear guidelines. But as their proposal moved through higher levels of review and approval, Marcus also realized that their relationship management protocol was being tested in ways Elena's careful planning hadn't fully anticipated. Success was bringing new pressures and opportunities that would challenge their ability to maintain the balance between professional excellence and personal connection that had allowed them to function effectively as a team. The 3,200-meter badge that had first caught Marcus's attention was proving to be just the beginning of Elena's impact on his understanding of what was possible in military service and in personal relationships that developed within professional contexts. As their project approached the critical phases that would determine its ultimate success or failure, Marcus found himself grateful for Elena's systematic approach to managing their connection, but also aware that the most challenging tests of their relationship framework were still ahead of them. The call that changed everything came at 0630 hours on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after Elena and Marcus had begun their collaboration. Marcus was reviewing final documentation for their presentation to the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency when his secure phone displayed a number he didn't recognize, but which carried the kind of prefix that meant someone very senior wanted his immediate attention. Staff Sergeant Chun, this is General Patterson's office. The General needs to see you and Staff Sergeant Vasquez at 1,400 hours today for a classified briefing regarding your training proposal. Location and security details will be provided separately. The line went dead before Marcus could ask any questions, leaving him staring at his phone and trying to process the implications of being summoned by one of the most senior officers in Special Operations Command. General Patterson's reputation preceded him. He was known as someone who only got involved in projects that had the potential to fundamentally change military capabilities. Marcus immediately called Elena's secure line, reaching her during what sounded like an early morning training session based on the background noise of rifle fire and range commands. "We need to meet immediately," he said without preamble. "Something big is happening with the project, and we need to be prepared for it." Elena's response was characteristically calm and focused. "How big?" "General Patterson wants to see us this afternoon for a classified briefing. That's either very good news or very serious trouble, and I'm not sure which." There was a brief pause as Elena processed the information. "Meet me at the facility in 20 minutes. And Marcus, bring everything. All our documentation, all our backup files, everything we've developed for this project." The tone in Elena's voice told Marcus that she understood the significance of General Patterson's involvement even better than he did. When someone at that level requested a classified briefing about a training proposal that had started as an innovative idea from a single sniper, it meant their project had attracted attention from people who dealt with military capabilities at the highest levels of strategic planning. Marcus spent the next few hours in Elena's makeshift office, watching her prepare for the afternoon briefing with an intensity and thoroughness that reminded him why she was one of the most elite soldiers he had ever encountered. She approached their preparation with the same methodical precision she brought to extreme distance shooting, anticipating every possible question and ensuring they had comprehensive answers for scenarios they hadn't even considered. "Patterson doesn't just review training proposals," Elena said as she organized their materials into carefully labeled folders. He evaluates capabilities that could affect strategic military planning for the next decade. If he's interested in our work, it means someone thinks this project could have implications far beyond improving sniper training. Marcus watched Elena work, noting the way her focus intensified when she was dealing with high-stakes situations. Over the weeks they had been collaborating, he had learned to recognize the subtle changes in her demeanor that indicated she was shifting into the operational mindset that had made her one of the most effective soldiers in the military. "What do you think he wants?" Marcus asked. Elena looked up from her organizational tasks, and Marcus could see the analytical process happening behind her eyes as she considered possibilities and probabilities with the same systematic approach she applied to ballistic calculations. "Best case scenario," she said, "he wants to fast-track our proposal and provide resources for implementation that go far beyond what we originally requested. Worst case scenario, he's been told to shut down our project because it conflicts with other programs or raises security concerns we weren't aware of." The range of possible outcomes made Marcus realize how little control they actually had over their project's future. They had developed an excellent proposal and successfully navigated the initial approval process, but ultimate decisions about implementation would be made by people who had access to information and strategic considerations that were completely outside their clearance levels. "Either way," Elena continued, "we need to be prepared to defend every aspect of our proposal and demonstrate that we understand the full implications of what we're suggesting. Patterson will have done his homework on us, and he'll know things about our backgrounds and capabilities that we might not expect him to know." The reminder that General Patterson would have access to comprehensive information about their military records and personal histories made Marcus suddenly aware of how their relationship management protocol might be evaluated by senior officers who were assessing their professionalism and reliability. "Elena," Marcus said, "what if he knows about our personal situation? I mean, what if our relationship becomes a factor in how he evaluates the project?" Elena's pause was brief, but significant, and Marcus could see her considering implications she had probably already thought about, but hadn't wanted to address directly. "Then, we demonstrate that our personal connection has made us more effective as a professional team, not less," she said finally. "We show him that we can maintain complete military professionalism while acknowledging that good working relationships sometimes develop personal dimensions that enhance rather than compromise professional performance." The confidence in Elena's response impressed Marcus, but he also sensed that she was preparing for a conversation that could challenge their relationship management framework in ways they hadn't fully anticipated. General Patterson's evaluation of their project would inevitably include an assessment of their reliability and judgment as military professionals. As they continued their preparation, Marcus found himself thinking about the balance between personal authenticity and professional requirements that had become central to his relationship with Elena. They had developed a framework for managing their connection that worked well in normal circumstances, but a classified briefing with a senior general represented exactly the kind of high-stakes situation where personal complications could become professional liabilities. "Marcus," Elena said, looking up from a technical specification she had been reviewing, "regardless of what happens this afternoon, I want you to know that working with you on this project has been one of the most professionally satisfying experiences I've had in the military." The unexpected personal comment caught Marcus off guard, partly because Elena rarely initiated discussions about their relationship during work sessions, and partly because her tone suggested she was preparing for the possibility that their collaboration might be ending. "Same here," he said, meeting her gaze and feeling the same intensity of connection that had been developing over weeks of close partnership. "This project has challenged me to think about military service in ways I hadn't considered before." Elena's smile was warm, but also slightly sad, and Marcus got the impression that she was thinking about outcomes that went beyond simple project approval or disapproval. "Whatever Patterson decides about our proposal," she said, "our work together has already demonstrated something important about what's possible when people with complementary skills collaborate on projects they care about. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's secure phone indicating an incoming message with final details about their afternoon briefing. The location was a conference facility Marcus had never accessed before, requiring security clearances and escort procedures that emphasized the seriousness of their meeting with General Patterson. At exactly 1,400 hours, Marcus and Elena found themselves in a windowless conference room that contained more advanced communication and display technology than most military installations possessed. General Patterson entered with 2 aides and a presence that immediately commanded the attention of everyone in the room. Staff Sergeant Chun, Staff Sergeant Vasquez, the general said, settling into his chair with the economical movements of someone accustomed to making every action count. I've reviewed your proposal and the evaluations from the people who have been working with you over the past several weeks. What you've developed is impressive, but I need to understand the full scope of what you're actually suggesting. Elena responded first, providing a concise but comprehensive overview of their training program that demonstrated her ability to communicate complex technical concepts to senior leadership without losing essential details. Marcus watched her present their work with the same precision and confidence she brought to everything else, but he was also aware of General Patterson's measuring gaze as he evaluated both the substance of their proposal and their capabilities as military professionals. The computational aspects of your program would require software development that goes significantly beyond current military ballistic calculation capabilities, General Patterson observed after Elena had finished her presentation. Have you considered the security implications of developing advanced targeting algorithms that could be compromised or misused if they fell into the wrong hands? The question revealed a level of strategic thinking about their proposal that Marcus hadn't fully considered, but Elena's response demonstrated that she had anticipated this concern. Yes, sir, she said. The algorithms we're proposing would include multiple security layers and authentication requirements that would make unauthorized use extremely difficult. Additionally, the software would be designed with built-in limitations that would prevent it from being adapted for non-military applications. General Patterson's follow-up questions continued for the next hour, covering everything from implementation timelines to international implications of advancing American extreme distance shooting capabilities. Marcus found himself impressed by the breadth and depth of the general's understanding of their proposal, but also increasingly aware that decisions about their project involved strategic considerations that went far beyond training effectiveness. Your personal working relationship, General Patterson said, shifting his attention between Marcus and Elena in a way that made clear he was aware of dimensions to their partnership that went beyond simple professional collaboration. How do you assess your ability to maintain appropriate military standards while working closely together on classified projects? The question was exactly what Marcus had been dreading, but Elena's response was immediate and confident. Sir, our personal connection has enhanced our professional effectiveness without compromising our adherence to military standards. We've established clear boundaries and protocols that allow us to maintain complete professionalism while benefiting from the trust and communication that develop between effective team members. General Patterson's expression was unreadable, but Marcus sensed that the general was evaluating not just their words, but their demeanor and the way they interacted with each other during the interview. Military relationships that develop personal dimensions require exceptional maturity and judgment to manage appropriately, the general said. The consequences of poor judgment in such situations can extend far beyond the individuals involved, especially when classified projects and sensitive capabilities are at stake. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he realized that General Patterson was providing both a warning and an opportunity. The general was acknowledging their relationship while making clear that their professional future depended on their ability to handle it with appropriate discretion and maturity. We understand the responsibilities involved, sir, Marcus said. Our commitment to the success of this project and to military professionalism takes priority over any personal considerations. General Patterson studied them both for several moments before continuing. Your proposal has attracted interest at levels you probably haven't considered. The capabilities you're suggesting could affect not just sniper training, but broader questions about technological advancement in military applications. That level of attention brings opportunities, but also scrutiny that will test your judgment and professionalism in ways you may not have experienced before. Elena's response demonstrated her understanding of the implications the general was describing. Sir, we're prepared for whatever level of responsibility comes with advancing this project. Our priority is ensuring that these training methods reach the soldiers who can benefit from them, regardless of the personal or professional challenges involved. The remainder of the briefing covered implementation details and resource requirements that went far beyond Marcus's most optimistic expectations. General Patterson's questions revealed that their proposal was being evaluated as part of a broader initiative to advance military technological capabilities, with potential applications and implications they had never considered. As the meeting concluded, General Patterson's final comments provided both encouragement and warning that would shape their project's future direction. Your work will be fast-tracked through the approval process, he said, but with that acceleration comes increased oversight and higher standards for professional performance. You'll be working with people and on projects that represent some of the most advanced military capabilities currently in development. That opportunity comes with responsibilities that extend well beyond your current understanding. Walking out of the briefing facility, Marcus found himself trying to process the full implications of what they had just experienced. Their project was being approved and supported at levels they had never imagined possible. But with success came pressures and responsibilities that would test their relationship management framework in ways Elena's careful planning hadn't fully anticipated. That went better than our best-case scenario, Elena said as they reached their vehicles. But it also means everything we do from here forward will be scrutinized by people who can end our careers with a single phone call. Marcus nodded, feeling both excitement about their project's future and apprehension about the increased pressure they would be operating under. How do you think Patterson really feels about our personal situation? Elena's expression became thoughtful as she considered the general's comments and demeanor during their interview. I think he's giving us the opportunity to prove that we can handle it appropriately. But he's also making clear that any mistakes or lapses in judgment will have consequences that go far beyond just us. The increased stakes of their professional collaboration would require them to maintain even higher standards of military professionalism while continuing to work closely together on projects that matter deeply to both of them. The framework they had developed for managing their relationship would need to accommodate not just their personal feelings, but also the scrutiny that came with operating at the highest levels of military capability development. Over the following days, Marcus discovered that General Patterson's warning about increased oversight was an understatement. Their expanded project brought them into contact with researchers, officers, and technical specialists who operated at levels of military science and strategy that were completely new territory for both of them. Elena adapted to the increased pressure and responsibility with the same systematic approach she brought to everything else, but Marcus could see that the additional scrutiny was testing their relationship management protocol in ways that required constant vigilance and adjustment. The personal aspects of our relationship are going to have to become even more carefully managed, Elena said during one of their evening planning sessions. We're not just representing ourselves anymore. We're representing advanced military capabilities that affect national security planning. The evolution of their professional responsibilities was requiring them to grow and adapt in ways that challenged their understanding of both military service and personal relationships. The balance between authenticity and discretion that they had established was being tested by circumstances that demanded even higher levels of professional performance. Marcus found himself both grateful for Elena's systematic approach to managing their connection and increasingly aware of how much their relationship had come to mean to him. The framework she had developed was allowing them to function effectively under increased pressure, but it was also highlighting just how significant their personal bond had become. The 3,200-meter badge that had first attracted Marcus's attention represented just the beginning of Elena's impact on his understanding of excellence, dedication, and the complex relationships that could develop between people who share demanding professional challenges. As their project moved into its most critical phases, Marcus realized that Elena had changed not just his approach to military service, but his understanding of what was possible when personal connection and professional excellence combined to create something greater than either could achieve alone. Their success was bringing opportunities neither had imagined when they first met on that training range, but it was also testing their relationship in ways that would determine whether their personal connection could survive the pressures that came with operating at the highest levels of military capability development. The framework Elena had created would need to prove itself under conditions that would challenge every assumption they had made about balancing professional excellence with personal authenticity. 8 months after Marcus first noticed Elena's 3,200-meter badge, their training program had evolved into something neither of them had imagined possible when they shared that first conversation at the brass shell. The Advanced Extreme Distance Marksmanship Program, as it was officially designated, had become a flagship initiative for military technological development, with funding, resources, and oversight from the highest levels of the Department of Defense. But success had come with complications that tested every aspect of the relationship management framework Elena had so carefully constructed. As the program's co-directors, Marcus and Elena found themselves operating under a level of scrutiny that made their personal connection simultaneously more important and more dangerous than either had anticipated. The final test of their program and their relationship came on a gray December morning at the Army's most advanced testing facility in Nevada. They were demonstrating their training methods to an audience that included senior officers from all military branches, defense contractors, and international observers from allied nations. Everything they had worked for over the past months would be evaluated based on the performance of the 12 soldiers who had completed their revolutionary training program. Marcus stood in the observation tower, watching Elena conduct the final briefing for the demonstration. She had changed over the months of intense program development, becoming more confident in her ability to lead and direct complex operations while maintaining the precision and focus that had first captured his attention. But the pressure of their increased responsibilities had also made their relationship more complicated and more precious than either had expected. The demonstration will consist of 3 phases, Elena explained to the assembled observers, her voice carrying the authority that came from months of proving her expertise to skeptical senior officers. Phase 1 tests computational accuracy under time pressure. Phase 2 evaluates performance against moving targets under adverse environmental conditions. Phase 3 demonstrates effective engagement at extreme distances under combat stress simulation. Marcus watched the faces of the observers as Elena outlined the testing protocol, noting the mixture of skepticism and anticipation that their program had generated throughout the military community. The techniques they had developed pushed the boundaries of what most people considered possible in military marksmanship, and proving their effectiveness under observation by senior leadership would determine whether their innovations became standard military capability or remained experimental curiosities. The first phase of testing proceeded exactly as Elena had predicted during their months of development and refinement. The soldiers who had completed their training program demonstrated computational abilities and shooting accuracy that exceeded the performance of traditionally trained snipers by margins that impressed even the most skeptical observers. But it was during the second phase that Marcus realized just how fundamentally their program had changed military marksmanship capabilities. Watching soldiers successfully engage moving targets at distances beyond 2,000 meters under conditions that included wind, temperature variations, and time pressure, Marcus felt the satisfaction of professional achievement combined with pride in Elena's vision and leadership. The hit rate is exceeding our projected benchmarks, Elena said quietly as she joined Marcus in the observation tower during a brief pause between testing phases. But the real test is Phase 3. That's where we find out if our stress simulation training actually prepares shooters for combat-level psychological pressure. Marcus nodded, aware that the final phase of testing would push their trained soldiers to limits that went beyond technical skill and entered the realm of mental toughness and emotional control that separated good snipers from exceptional ones. Whatever happens, Marcus said, what we've accomplished here is going to change military training for years to come. You should be proud of what you've created. Elena's smile was warm but also slightly sad, and Marcus recognized the expression she got when she was thinking about outcomes and possibilities that went beyond immediate success or failure. We've created this, she corrected gently. This program exists because you were willing to support ideas that challenged normal procedures and help navigate institutional obstacles that I couldn't have handled alone. The acknowledgement of their collaborative achievement carried emotional weight that went far beyond professional recognition. But before Marcus could respond, the final phase of testing began. Phase 3 was designed to simulate the psychological pressure and decision-making complexity that snipers faced in actual combat situations. The soldiers were required to make rapid calculations and execute precise shots while dealing with simulated combat stress, time pressure, and decision-making scenarios that had no perfect solutions. Marcus watched Elena observe the testing with the same intensity she brought to her own shooting, evaluating not just technical performance, but the mental resilience and adaptive capability that separated soldiers who could function under extreme pressure from those who couldn't. The results exceeded even Elena's most optimistic projections. Soldiers who had completed their training program consistently outperformed traditionally trained snipers in every measured category, demonstrating capabilities that redefined what military leadership considered achievable in extreme distance marksmanship. Outstanding, said General Patterson, who had observed the entire demonstration from the primary observation position. The performance improvements are substantial and consistent across all measured parameters. This represents exactly the kind of capability advancement we need to be developing. As the formal demonstration concluded and observers began filing out of the facility, Marcus felt the mixed emotions that came with achieving professional goals that had required months of intense effort and personal sacrifice. We did it, he said to Elena.